As you know, controlling the aircraft using the default profiles which are coming with the joysticks can be hard in Flight Simulator 2024. In this video, I'm going to look at the TWCS Throttle and will show you how you can configure it so it makes more sense. So let's roll the intro and then let's look at the steps how to do that. So the first thing we of course need to do is we need to go to the settings menu, right? So go to the settings menu, then you can go to the controls and there you will find the TWCS Throttle. By default, there are two profiles configured, the general controls and the airplane controls, and all have buttons assigned, right? So if we would click here on the filters, you would see a lot of options, which in some cases make sense, in some cases might make less sense. And so you can see that some of them have been assigned multiple times. This isn't always an issue, but in some cases it can be an issue because if they are assigned multiple times, it also means that you might see some weirdness happening. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to create new profiles. So to do that, we're going to first duplicate this one, right? And then we can give it a name. So for example, we will give it a name, TWCS Throttle Custom MSFS. Don't select the apply to all aircraft or set as default unless you want to apply all these settings to all the aircrafts. And that's something which really depends on your scenario because you might fly using different aircrafts. For this one, we're going to do the same, right? So we're going to give it a new name and we're going to say TWCS Throttle Custom MSFS, and then don't select these options again. Now, if you made an error with the names, you can easily do a rename them by pressing this gear and then select rename. The other thing which we now can see is that all the buttons have been assigned, which we want to clear. And that's using the clear button. We can do that, right? We're going to press this gear and then clear all the buttons, which will bring us to, let's say, a completely empty list. Then you can switch to either filter essentials or to none. And then we're going to simply go to the list, right? In the top left of this video, you will see which buttons I'm, I would say, changing to make it easier to follow. And the first one is the autopilot master, which is the orange button on the joystick. And we're going to scan it, and that's button number 1, right? It's really easy, nothing hard. Say this was probably the easiest one. Now above that, we've got button number 11, 12, 13, and 14. By default, they're not assigned to any functionality. However, of course, you can decide to do that. For this video, I'm not going to do it. Maybe I will do it as a bonus at the end of this video, but I've not decided yet about that. So let's continue with the one above that. And the one above that are the buttons number 7, 8, 9, and 10. Right, so 7 is the heading indicator. So let's search for it, heading indicator. And you can see that that one is over here. Now you see that this one also, some other categories are there, right? The PFD heading increase and the MFD heading increase. But those are, I would say, specifically for this configuration. So if you would assign a button here, it will create a specific configuration here, which can then be used for the 172 Skyhawk. In this case, we're going to use this one nicely and make sure that we set the correct button, right? So button number 7, that's correct. So we set it to the heading indicator. Then the next one is button number 8. And button number 8 is for toggling the lights. Now, let's say I think this one is a little bit, let's say, discussable, right? Because do you want to switch on all the lights? Yes or no? Well, maybe. And you can see that there are, I would say, a lot of options here, right? All lights toggle, all lights toggle. So you can also see that there are some duplicates. For now, what I did is use the top one and simply press the button right away from me, which means it's number 8. Then we continue with the altimeter, right? So the altimeter, if we search for it, you can see two options. You've got the set altimeter to the millibars times 16, or sync the altimeter setting to sea level pressure, or to 9.92 if above 18,000 feet. I'm going to select this one, and then I'm going to push the button down, which refers to button number 9, as you can see. Then we've got the NTIs. Also pretty important, NTIs. And you need to search for the toggle NTIs. Press the button again, and then pull the button towards you which will assign button number 10 to it. Right, so up to now, not that hard, maybe a little bit hard, but I would say it's doable. So let's continue with that small, I'd say, joystick above that. And that small joystick above it has 4 functions, which are mainly related to the cockpit. So what we can do is we can say, hey, translate cockpit. And then we've got view left and view right, right? So I would say in this case, view left, I will push it to me. If I move to the right, I'm going to push it away from me. And then you can increase or decrease the height using the joystick. But you can also use the view backward and view forward. It really depends on what you prefer, but by default, it's set to increase the height, right? So let's do that. So here we go, cockpit. Whoa. Cockpit view. And then we need to search because this one I would say is more difficult to find, right? But here it is. Cockpit increase. We're going to push it upwards. Decrease backwards. Or downwards, sorry. So this again is an option, but as mentioned, you can also use it, assign it to the view forward and view backward. And I did it now wrong, right? So let me delete this one. Delete. And then reassign it, decrease height downwards and increase upwards, right? So let's say either you go upwards or downwards. That's not the case. Well, if you would do these buttons, you will view the aircraft from the front or from the back. Now, that's, would say, wasn't that hard, right? It was still doable, so you can change these settings relatively easy. Continuing with the other button, and that's the button on the front, which has multiple functions, right? It's kind of a joystick, which you can move around, but it also has the option to reset the view. And to reset the view, we've got multiple options for that. First of all, we've got the reset cockpit view. So if you press this one and then press the joystick, then you can see that weird things are happening. So be aware, it's button number 6. That's the one which you need to assign to it. And you can do the same thing for the external view, as well as the drone roll and a fixed camera view. That again really depends on if you want to do it that way. It's not mandatory to do it, but hey, it's easier to do it. Now, of course, you also have the options to say kind of move the camera around, right? Because that makes sense. So search for cockpit view. And if we search for the cockpit view, we've got a few options over there, right? So what we can do in this scenario is we can use it for, let's say, few options. So what the manual says is that you can change the view look, right? And I would say that's kind of, well, interpretable, right? You can interpret it like the way you want. What I did in my case, I changed it to this. So let me show you. I moved it to view. And then you will see that you've got the options, for example, to say, hey, I want to do a quick view up from the cockpit. And then press it upwards. And I can press it downwards. However, what you see in this case, that it assigns an axis. This triggers already something that you need to change something to something different, right? Because a digital one is something which you will push. So which means either a button where you can enable something or like that. So in this case, what we need to do is we need to go to general, and then you will find cockpit view yaw axis, which means up and down, or sorry, left and right. And we've got the pitch axis, which means up and down. Now, the nice thing is that you can do the same thing for the external view, right? So the external view has the same options, right? And that's, let's say, to circle around the aircraft. Again, what you will see is that it will show the ones, but the ones in this case don't matter, right? Because if you're inside the cockpit, it will use I would say, if you use the button, it will be used to perform that action, which is assigned from inside the cockpit. If you're outside the cockpit, it will do like this. Of course, you can do multiple things also for the drone views. But again, that's up to you. I only use the, I would say, external view and cockpit view. That's why I assign it like this. Now, let's continue with the flaps, which is the button next to it. And that one we're going to use it like this. So if we push it downwards, it's gonna it's gonna increase. That might makes more sense. And if we pull it upwards, it will decrease the flaps. So button number 4 and 5, right, which will allow us to move the flaps. Here you can see again there are also specific aircraft examples for that one, but I decided to move it to the let's say general section, so it's always applicable to all the aircrafts, right? Toggling the landing gear is the next one, because for some reason they skipped number 3. Landing gear. So toggle landing gear, I will assign button number 2 to it, and then this should be good to go. Right, so button number 3 again, it's a spare button which you can assign to everything, I would say, which you are using on a regular base. So there is some flexibility into that. Then of course we've got the trim. The trim axis, you will have a lot of options there. And what you need to do is in this case, the trim level -100, +100, because it's an axis, and then simply move that wheel around. And if you move that wheel around and you're lucky, then it will configure it correctly. In some scenarios, what you need to do is, I would say, try it a few times and then it will work. Did we have everything? No, because we missed something, and that's the throttle axis itself. So simply search for throttle. And there you will find a lot of throttle options, but the one you need is over here. It's the throttle axis. Don't ask me why, but hey, that's it. And then move the throttle around or up and down, and then you should be good to go. Now, of course, when you configured everything, it's really important to test it. Now, to test it, make sure that you're on the ground, because if you don't do it on the ground, you might see weird things happening. So we're already outside of the cockpit, right? So we can, let's say, move the buttons around if we want. We can check the lights, right? So if you can see, I'm checking the lights, which are working. What are other things which we can do? Well, we can move around, right? We can move right, we can move left, we can move upwards, downwards, and if we press that button, it will reset. So we're good to go. Now think about this, right? I'm now using a separate controller to go inside the aircraft. So one of the things you could consider to do is assign that button number 3 to go to the external side of the cockpit, right? So I'm showing it to you quickly what you can do with that button number 3, which isn't used by default. So press the options and then search for cockpit. And then you have this button. And then if you assign it, for example, to number 3, then you can go, I would say, outside and inside the aircraft really easy, right? So simply using that button, which will make it, I would say, a lot simpler. You can see my joystick is a little bit wonky because it's moving, I would say, continuously to the right, but that's it. But when we're talking, right, we can also use the same controls to, say, look upwards, look downwards. But what you sometimes have is that upwards is, let's say, moving downwards and the other way around. If that happens, what you need to do is the following. You go to the settings, and inside the settings, you will search for that specific controller. Now, to make it easier, you can push on that filter, because then you can only see the assigned ones. So what we need to do in this case is we need to say, okay, hey, the pitch axis, we need to modify it. So press the gear and then use this button. And this one will make sure that it reverses the axis, right? So in this case, reversing the axis, if we would do it now, it works perfectly. So keep that in mind. If you're having that issue, go inside the settings again and make sure that you change that setting. So that's it. So what do we else need to do or need to test, right? Well, we can change the flaps, for example. Let's see if we can move the flaps. And you can also see it's moving over here, right? Or moving upwards. So that also works perfectly fine. Now the lights, right? We already tested it. We can change them. Let's move the yoke. So if we move a little bit closer, we can see, come on, over here, we can switch on the lights, and you can see that all the lights are switched on or off, right? Which again, it really depends on if you like this or not. It's really up to you. Then with that done, we can also check if the anti-eye settings can be configured, right? If the aircraft has anti-eye settings, you can test it. If it doesn't have it, I'd say it becomes a little bit hard, like in my case, right? So keep that in mind, that you need an aircraft which has that specific functionality. Other things. set the altimeter, right? So set the altimeter, you can do it. It will by default set it to 29.92, if I'm correct. Or is it? That's the wrong button. Or to that specific sea level, which it did already, right? I would press B, yeah, B, same thing, right? The letter B on the keyboard. So the altimeter has been set already, correct. Now we've got the heading indicator, right? The heading indicator, you can change it if you want using that button. But I would say I would not assign this button normally, but hey, you can do it like that. Then of course we've got the cockpit, say increase of the altitude, or not the altitude. Let's say if you're increasing your height in the cockpit, yes or no. Let's see if that one works. Because that one I had some issues with it, but hey, it looks like it works now. We can move left, right, right. That's how to do it. And it also brings us to that nice wheel over here, right? The trim wheel. We can use the trim wheel, as you can see, and we can also then use the throttle. For the throttle, the same thing is applicable. If it doesn't work, go back to the settings and make sure that you set the throttle correct. So I'm going to set the throttle here, throttle axis, press the gear again, and then say invert, press escape, save back, and then let's see if it works. In this case, it will not work. And that's what I sometimes see also other people reporting, that if you then reset the view, right, reverse the axis, and then try again, it sometimes works. I would say still works incorrect. And then you need to uncheck it and then it will work correctly, right? So not a nice thing to do, but hey, it will resolve your issue. So if you get the issue, make sure that you're switching on the reverse axis. Then I would say try it again. And then you see, as I'm currently showing you, that it will work. And here ends this video where we looked at how to configure the TWCS throttle from Thrustmaster. I hope you liked this video. If you're looking for another joystick configuration, for example, the T1600 mic, then have a look at my channel because there are more videos which are describing how to configure that one. All of the videos are for the single engine aircrafts only. I'm planning to release some new videos about multi-engine aircraft, or yeah, multi-engine aircrafts. But hey, then you might also have a different joystick, but just for sanity, I will post them so everybody can enjoy it. Again, here ends this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and hope to see you back next time.